The U.S. economy is not doing well. So are the economies of many countries across the globe. So what makes the U.S. different? Well, aside from having the highest infection rate in the world, it may have a new president. Incoming President-elect Joe Biden, if confirmed, as reported by the media.
As I said on Saturday, I'm humbled by the trust and confidence the American people have placed in me and in Vice President-elect Harris. And we're ready to get to work addressing the needs of the American people. Today, that work begins. It starts with doing everything possible to get the COVID-19 under control.
Yeah, key word there, control. But will Biden and his team be able to deal with a problem that is so severe, a problem that has just ravaged the U.S.? One of the consequences, hunger. Check this out. This is what's going on at an LA food center.
Pre-pandemic, we measure things in pounds, and we were distributing about 1.5 million pounds every week in and out of our distribution centers. And now we're running 4 million pounds a week coming in and out of our distribution centers here in South LA and Commerce.
Hello, welcome to Economic Divide with me, Kabatak Waib. In this week's episode, we will take a look at the U.S. economy, how on earth it can climb out of the economic downturn, mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and whether the current U.S. president or the incoming president-elect, as reported by the media, have a game plan to tackle this monumental challenge. Don't forget, we always want to hear from you on our show, so why not get in touch with us by visiting our Twitter page using the marker @ED_program. We would love to hear from you and share your thoughts, so don't be shy. Get in touch with us and let us know about the stories that matter to you. Now, first, let's take a look at President-elect Joe Biden. He has said that business and labor leaders have signaled willingness to operate to fix the U.S. economy. He also stressed that the coronavirus first must be brought under control. He said more people would die if President Donald Trump continues blocking a U.S. transition of power. The incoming president-elect also urged Congress to pass relief legislation. As of the recording of this program, no relief deal in sight, as crucial pandemic relief programs are due to be shut down by the end of the year. Now, U.S. Congress needs to act fast. For the first week of November, this is a reason why they need to act fast. The U.S. has registered a total of 742,000 new applications for unemployment compensation. Now, that means tens of millions of Americans are out of work. Now, how is the incoming U.S. administration, once confirmed, be able to bring back these jobs? American voters did not elect Joe Biden because they thought that he would be the best man to revive the economy. The economy may well define his presidency nonetheless. Biden will take office in January amid a crisis brought about by the pandemic, which is capable of causing immensely more economic harm before vaccination is widespread. He will also inherit a business landscape in the throes of a once-in-a-generation shift, as technology becomes more embedded in everyday life and in more industries, a shift that has been simultaneously hastened and overshadowed by the disease.
Biden's program is very, very well targeted to be able to reverse the economic downturn, because what it involves is a lot of spending at the local level to improve infrastructure, to change the mixture of sources of energy, to provide for local social services, to attend to the health problem, and to reinstate programs for worker welfare.
Whether Biden succeeds or fails depends on how he manages these twin sources of change. Make no mistake, it is not like the U.S. president-elect lacks experience dealing with economic woes. When he became the vice president of Barack Obama in 2009, it was the depth of the Great Recession, with the U.S. economy having lost nearly 3.6 million jobs the prior year and still shedding jobs at a rate of 800,000 a month. But the U.S. economy now faces different challenges than in 2009. The basic question here is, how bad is the U.S. economy doing? I mean, it's very simple to see that if we were to break down the numbers in the different economic sectors that show the depth of the crisis. For starters, the unemployment numbers. It is estimated that over 30 million Americans may have lost their jobs. Now add to that the millions of workers who were out of their jobs before the pandemic, that number could creep up to 40 million easily. Keep in mind, many unemployed have given up work and are not being recorded. Then comes the poverty rate. The official poverty rate in the U.S. was registered at around 10% for the year 2019 before the pandemic hit. Now, when the $600 a week bonus unemployment payments stopped, poverty rates actually increased. Latest figures indicate about 7 million people are now living below the poverty line. Again, keep in mind the variance since many are not being reported. And finally, what about economic growth? At one point, the U.S. GDP drop in 2020, in the second quarter, that is, was the worst in its modern history. It was down 32.9%. That being the largest quarterly drop since the Great Depression. And since then, the U.S. has regained just 2/3 of that figure.
Biden has repeatedly said that before America could rebuild its battered economy, it needed to get the virus under control.
COVID, it's a terrible disaster. The United States right now is the largest loci for infections, and now has surpassed 250,000 deaths.
The coronavirus has affected almost every country around the world. Many have taken an economic hit this year as a result. However, while citizens of other countries generally agree on how to move forward, Americans have a wide ideological divide that could make Biden's job much harder, as presidents often draw on public support to help push their agendas forward.
Economic recovery, his view of economic recovery is a recovery that's based upon doing something at the very, very grassroots level. And that's extraordinarily important to reverse the kind of top-down corporate subsidies, corporate welfare that the Trump administration offered.
The survey conducted over the summer found that among citizens of economically advanced countries struggling to contain the virus, Americans were the most polarized along party lines in their assessments of the government's response to the virus and the economy. Furthermore, another poll from October revealed that only 24% of Trump supporters said that the coronavirus outbreak was very important to their vote, compared to 82% of Biden supporters. Conversely, 84% of Trump supporters said that the economy was very important, versus 66% of Biden supporters. Biden has promised to follow the advice of public health advisors, even if they recommend shutting down businesses. Biden's supporters may applaud that approach, but he will find it challenging to convince the rest of the country that it's the right way to go, especially Trump's most ardent loyalists, many of whom have shunned even basic preventative measures like masks. The congressional situation is a major obstacle for Biden's agenda as well. The U.S. president-elect may get only parts of his broad plans spanning everything from child care to infrastructure to climate change through a gridlocked Congress.
Okay, joining us in the studio today is Craig Holman, PhD, serves as a Public Citizens Capitol Hill lobbyist on ethics, lobbying, and campaign finance rules. Now, Craig is an expert on campaign finance reform, governmental ethics, lobbying practices, and the impact of money in politics. Previously, he was senior policy analyst at the Brennan Center for Justice, New York University School of Law. Craig, welcome to Economic Divide. The U.S. President Donald Trump's economic plans were deemed a success before COVID-19. But right now, we're looking at a massive economic devastation. For example, unemployment at an all-time high, pretty much. Business bankruptcies also at an all-time high. Increasing poverty. President-elect Biden, once confirmed, has focused on spending with a lockdown to incur beforehand. Do you think he's going to be able to jumpstart the economy?
Biden's going to make every effort at jump-starting the economy, and I suspect when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic, he will succeed on this. Biden has laid out his plans, first things first, and that is #1 on his priority.
Okay, you say disastrous Trump administration. Biden has focused on 4 major areas to transform the U.S. economy: COVID-19, economic recovery, racial equity, and climate change. Are those 4 areas going to work?
Well, there's actually his whole program is different than what we've seen with the Trump administration. Biden has laid out his economic plans through the course of the campaign. At first, he's going to focus on working class interests, which, by the way, is an absolute reversal from the Trump administration. Trump has favored the very wealthy. He's given tax cuts to the wealthy, tax cuts to the corporations. Biden plans on reversing those tax cuts to the wealthy.
Okay, you apparently are very pro-Trump, but I'm going to play devil's advocate. Are you looking at Biden's economic initiatives in which the transition team says it wants to mobilize American manufacturing and innovation and build a modern infrastructure for clean energy?
Yeah, you know, I was mentioning that one of Biden's priorities is infrastructural development, and that includes energy, along with roads and bridges and the entire infrastructure that makes the economy operate. Biden has pledged so far to spend about $1 trillion on developing the infrastructure for the U.S. economy over a period of about 10 years. That's going to have to be negotiated once again with the Republican Senate. So whether he gets to go that far, it remains to be seen. But that is going to be the new emphasis coming out of the White House.
And finally, how do you think the U.S. is going to be able to offset China's economic influence globally and its penetration into U.S. markets when China is already ahead in its post-COVID-19 period? All the numbers say so, while the U.S. is still grappling with the COVID-19.
There are 2 different questions in there. First of all, this is something Biden can do pretty much on his own. We've seen Trump alienate our international colleagues, literally lock out of any kind of negotiations countries like Iran or China. And Biden is not of that ilk. Biden wants to work with our international colleagues. He wants to open up relations and communications with countries like Iran and China. And so we're going to see a big change. And Biden can do that on his own as the executive. He doesn't need congressional approval on a lot of this. So we are going to see changes there.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's Craig Holman, Public Citizens Capitol Hill lobbyist, with his statements there. Obviously very pro Biden, again, once Biden gets elected, or confirmed, I should say. Well, it's time for a quick break here on Economic Divide, but don't go anywhere. We have plenty more coming up in the next half of the program. First, journalist and researcher Otefe Padidar is back with her take on the U.S. economy, and she does have a thing or two to say since she wrote this.
A look at the production of oilseeds in Iran on Press TV's Bazaar program. Join us on our visit to an oilseeds factory and see for yourself how they extract oil from vegetables. Don't miss Bazaar at this time on Press TV.
Then the unemployment crisis in the U.S., yet another challenge on the path of the incoming U.S. president once confirmed. And finally, a look at how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the economic lives of African Americans. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Economic Divide with me, Kaveh. In this in-depth section, we are going to put the current Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin under the spotlight. Why? Well, it first started with this headline. Paul Krugman, who's a famous economist, slammed the Trump administration plot to sabotage the economy and hurt Biden. The article said that, unfortunately, a decision made by Mnuchin, according to the New York Times, won't make it any easier for Biden to handle the economy. Well, let's go to the source, the New York Times. Now, this is what the headline stated: Mnuchin's inglorious endgame. And the New York Times couldn't be more blunt than this. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin is spending his last few months in office trying to undermine President-elect Joe Biden and the American economy. How is Mnuchin going about this? Well, the Trump administration is reportedly abruptly curtailing the Federal Reserve's emergency lending programs. These are safety net programs that Americans rely on during these desperate times. Here is what Paul McCulley, former PIMCO chief, economist, and senior fellow at Cornell University, said about the Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin's decision in his appearance on CNBC.
You said you don't buy the fact that there wasn't a political flavor here. What do you mean by that, Paul? You think this was a deliberate attempt to sabotage President-elect Biden's economic tools?
I don't think it was a deliberate attempt to do so, but certainly they didn't have to do it now. And actually, they limit it to a degree the optionality or flexibility that the new Treasury Secretary would have. So that's what I mean by political, because a good, peaceful, smooth transition shouldn't be throwing sand into your successor's job. And I think that's what he did. So that's why I mean it had a flavor of a political action.
The unemployment crisis is yet another challenge on the path of the incoming U.S. president. The overall U.S. unemployment rate is currently 6.9%, which, while better than April's 14.7%, still means that 10 million pre-pandemic jobs are lost.
The real problem of reinvigorating industry in the United States is trying to figure out how to get small and medium-sized enterprises to restart, to go back on the track, because in fact it is the small and medium-sized industries that create most of the jobs, most of the opportunities, and have much of the opportunity for innovation, both in the environment and in a better quality of life.
Analysts say people who have been unemployed for 6 months or more are about twice as likely to drop out of the labor force as to find employment. Additionally, the longer a person is out of work, the less consumer purchasing they do, which further slows economic growth. Data shows that long-term unemployment as a share of all unemployment is growing fast across the U.S. In October, 3.6 million of the 11 million unemployed Americans have been out of work for 6 months or longer. That's a ratio that is not seen since mid-2014, when Biden was the country's vice president and the unemployment rate, like today, surpassed 6%. The continuing unemployment crisis has led economists to become increasingly pessimistic about when the country might return to pre-pandemic levels. Business and academic economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal in April predicted that the labor market would recover by 2022. But when surveyed again in October, 55% had extended the recovery forecast to the year 2023 or later.
Time now to bring in Atife Paridar. She's a researcher and journalist, and she joins us now to tell us more about the state of the U.S. economy. Welcome. So this time around, you're not only going to share with us your media posts, but you were also the writer of this program. So obviously you have a lot to say.
Yeah, well, I took to the social media because obviously Americans on social media, as I found out, are as divided as they are outside social media on whether Biden is the right guy for reviving the economy and salvaging the country from the pandemic. Well, there are a lot of guys who think that since Biden was the vice president of Obama and they did a great job back in 2009 after the Great Recession, and Biden helped Obama to revive the economy and create jobs, so he's the man for the job. As we see in this tweet and the next tweet, they think that he can do this. But, you know, this is a total different situation because that was something about mortgage, and that recession was not due to the pandemic. We have to see if Biden can do this. As we can see on the next tweet, a pro-Trump account is saying that Biden supported trade of the working economy, world peace, and low unemployment rate for a guy who just not Trump. You're all functioning retarded. Sorry for that last word.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, well, they're saying that things are already good. Why we have to bring another guy that we don't know if he has a plan or not? A lot of them are saying that Biden is going to let China take over the world economy. As we know, China at the moment is the second biggest economy in the world, and they are the US biggest rival. So they're saying that Biden is not the man for the job.
Okay, if he gets confirmed, that is. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you. Ataf there about the state of the U.S. economy and the social media post. All right. We couldn't cover the U.S. economy without talking about the unemployment situation. As usual, there is a disparity between the official figures and the actual number of people who are unemployed. Number which is, well, it's said to be perhaps over 30 million. And that is a result of the pandemic.
The killing of George Floyd, an unarmed African-American man at the hands of a white police officer, was the start of yet another wave of nationwide anti-racism protests in the U.S. Massive rallies and mobilizations against racial discriminations brought America's ongoing struggle with racism to the fore. But the ugly face of systemic racism is not just shown in viral videos. It has also been apparent as COVID-19 affects black communities in particular.
Racial inequality is extraordinarily evident and will involve recreating some of the basis for trying to overcome the profound political, cultural, and social inequalities that characterize the United States at the present time.
Official figures show that African Americans are less likely to have health insurance. This holds true even among the employed. Black workers are 60% more likely to be uninsured than white workers. Along with the lack of coverage, Black Americans have higher rates of chronic illnesses, including diabetes, high blood pressure, and obesity. All these conditions contribute to making the coronavirus pandemic all the more deadly for blacks than for whites, whom account for more than 60% of the population, but only about 53% of the deaths from the virus. Higher rates of infection and death among minorities demonstrate the racial character of inequality in America. All being said, observers believe that the next president of the United States won't be able to fix the economy or save the nation from the deadly disease unless he addresses the systemic racism that divides Americans. Addressing the pandemic's health and economic effects requires acknowledging these facts and acting accordingly. Back in September, it's been estimated that the U.S. has lost $16 trillion as a result of discrimination against African Americans. A new study conducted by Citigroup shows that since the year 2000, the U.S. gross domestic product has lost that much as a result of discriminatory practices in a range of areas, including in education and access to business loans. And not acting to reverse discriminatory practices will continue to exact a cost. Citigroup estimates that the economy would see a $5 trillion boost over the next 5 years if the U.S. were to tackle key areas of discrimination against minorities.
While the U.S. President Donald Trump is pushing ahead, trying to invalidate the results of the U.S. presidential election and drawing up plans to, attack Iran, Americans are dying. Shouldn't he focus on the economy more? But what about the fight on the economic front? Are there enough efforts that are being applied against the devastation that the COVID-19 is causing, like unemployment and hunger? I mean, a stock market that is performing well, that's not the only barometer that the economy is actually doing well. If Trump is out and the U.S. President-elect Biden is confirmed, what guarantees are there that he will be able to fix the problem? Just throwing money at the problem is not the solution, which is actually one of his solutions. It is reported that he's going to go on a $7 trillion spending spree. Where is that money going to come from? That's all the time we have for this week's episode. We hope you've enjoyed the show. You can watch this episode of ED again by logging on to our website and clicking on shows, where our on-demand service is just a click away. So you make sure you check it out. On behalf of myself, Kavitha, and the whole team here on Economic Divide, thanks for watching, stay safe, and see you again next time.